Okay, welcome everybody. Would like to welcome you to our telephone techniques, what I'm calling from the phone to the counter. And the idea is how do we get shoppers off the phone and into your shop? This is the very first in our series of what we call silver bullets. And I know there's really no single silver bullet. I've been to training sessions where people say, what's the silver bullet? And my answer is there's lots of silver bullets. It's like when people say to me, I'm looking for a mentor. And my answer to that is you should have more than one mentor. There's mentors in all different areas of our lives, some leadership mentors, maybe some spiritual mentors, different mentors we have for different things in our lives. And as far as silver bullets go, just recently I was talking with a part vendor that I'm going to be doing some training for, and I mentioned silver bullets. And he commented that it's actually a negative thing to have silver bullets. He said, because, he'll say at the beginning of his class, if you came here for a silver bullet on how to do diagnostics, well, it's simply not going to happen. And my answer is that's correct. There is no one silver bullet. And I actually put together a workshop called 101 Silver Bullets. And the entire package, just to let you know at the end, I don't know if it'll be 101 webinars. I rather doubt it. But I do have a 5-day service advisor class that I wrote, and I'm bite-sizing it into 20-minute segments because the attention span of people today is much shorter than it was before. And the example that I give is TED Talks. I don't know if any of you watch TED Talks. They're great. There's thousands of talks that are somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes long. They can't go beyond 20 minutes. They're not allowed to. And my experience is I'll turn it on and watch one on human behavior or whatever subject it might be. And it's like Netflix. It's designed to get you addicted, and it shows you the next session by the same type of topic. And then you watch that one and then watch that one. And I've caught myself, it's now 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've watched a couple of dozen of them for 3.5 hours or whatever. And if it was a one segment thing at one topic for 3.5 hours, I mean, who would even start it if it was 3.5 hours long? But when it's 10 or 20-minute segments, then it's simple that you can get into one after another after another. My experience is when they're all shorter like that, then you have less fluff. And as a trainer, then you need to make it succinct. So this is one of the silver bullets. And again, the package at the end, we're going to be calling it the Blueprint for Success. I also have a 5-day manager class, managers and owners of repair shops. And again, I'm taking that and bite-sizing it into 20-minute segments or less. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be 5 days times 8 hours a day, 40 hours of training divided by 20 minutes, and that's how many there would be. I truly don't know. But what I have done is gone through the topics and saw what I would be able to do in about 20 minutes or less. From the phone to the counter, one of the things I'm going to be sending out to you after this session with the recording and the link are recorded phone calls. Over the years, I have made thousands of phone calls to shops, and I've recorded hundreds of them. And I don't want to play them during this 20-minute segment, but I'm going to send you good, bad, and ugly. And there's a little exercise that you're going to see at the end. And I do recommend that you listen to those 3 calls and answer the question, did they follow the 8-step process? And did they use words that added value, or did they use words that diminish value? In our 5-day service advisor class, and actually we do it as well in our 3-day advisor class, on day 1, we have a microphone up front and we have a telephone and we have people call each other's shops. So we want to make sure that the person's not going to recognize the voice. So Jeff would call Patty's shop, Patty would call Phil's shop, and etc. And what we do is record those. And sometimes it's hard not to laugh just because it can get a little bit entertaining. And at the end of it, I'll say, what do you think? And invariably, the advisors, because it is an advisor class, invariably, every time it happens, but they'll say, but you're calling on the wrong day. And I say, what do you mean? Well, you got the shop owner, you got the foreman, you got the technician, you got the apprentice, you got the cleanup person, you got the whoever. I said, well, your phone's ringing today, even though you're here for 3 days, customers are calling your shop. And you're an expert, yes, but everybody in the shop should know how to answer the phone correctly. And when you see the 8-step process, we do recommend that you make it into like a business card size sign. and put it beside every phone in the shop so everybody's trained to answer it the exact same way. But I would say to the people, so what you're saying is if we called you, you would have done a better job than the people we just talked to, and the answer is yes. Then I say, well, actually what we did do is we called you last week, we recorded that phone call, and now we're going to listen to them. And I used to say, okay, Jeff, this is your call. Patty, this is your call. And I decided to make it just a tad more painful. And I'd say, let's listen to the first call. And again, this is a class, day one, 12 people in the room. Usually I don't know any of them, maybe a few. And I'll start the call and you see 12 people sitting there, ring, 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 ring. And as soon as the person hears themselves answer the phone, their head goes down. It's just automatic. You automatically know who in the class that call was. And things like, oh, you had no idea, they're super busy that day and I had customers at the counter, etc. The bottom line is I think a lot of us think we are better at the phone than we really are. And I believe it's an 8-step process. In classes, I'll play a call for people and say, what do you think? Or in the advisor class, we called that shop. What do you think? Well, they did a pretty good job. Okay. Did they ask for your name? No. Did they ask for your phone number? No. Did they set an appointment? No. So they were friendly, and that's a good thing, but it's not just good enough to be friendly. The idea is to get the shopper or customer off of the phone and into the shop. And I was doing a session in Seattle one time, and I said, we're going to phone each shop. And one lady who had never been to one of the sessions that I taught before said, why would we use classroom time to do that? And I said, well, you're going to make the calls during a coffee break and you'll just take notes. But I said, we're going to go through the 8-step process and we're going to rank each of those calls on that. So somebody's going to call your shop, etc., and give us feedback. So it's not really classroom time. But she thought it would be kind of a waste of classroom time to talk about telephone skills. She said, we know how to answer our phone. I said, well, what percentage of the people do you think that we're going to call are going to ask for our name? And she said, well, like all of them. I said, how many are going to ask for our phone number? She looked at me like, yes, all of them. And there's a fellow sitting beside her, Bill, who had been to many of my sessions. And he looked at her and said, ma'am, I'm just going to tell you that this next little while is going to be painful. And although we know better, sometimes we're so busy that we actually don't take the time to properly go through the phone call. And the idea, of course, is to get the person from the phone to the shop. From the phone to your counter, how do we get shoppers off the phone and into your shop? There's a few things I just want to make clear here. Is communicating clearly with customers requires special skills in today's modern world. Why do I put that? Just going to take a sip here. Life is different, busier than it's ever been before. We're trying to be multitaskers. We're trying to do too many things at the same time. And people are simply busy. They're calling from their cell phones. We can hardly hear them. There's noise in the background. They're on speakerphone, but we can hear the wind and whatever's happening. Sometimes people are talking to us and the radio's playing in the background, or you hear their TV and you think, could you please turn off that TV or radio, whatever. So the world's different. And the majority of what you communicate to people on a daily basis is done without words at all. And if you study communication, verbal communication is actually a smaller portion than the rest. And I want to go through this, and I know we're looking at telephone techniques, but if we look at the big picture of the 7 main forms of communication, first of all, of course, there's verbal. Second is listening, and there can be a huge difference between hearing and listening. Sometimes we hear something, but we didn't actually listen to what the person said. We heard them talking, but we don't really know what they said. We weren't really listening. A huge part of communication is visual. Facial expressions is a huge portion of that. And I'm going to recommend, if you've not taken training, there's lots of great stuff online on facial expressions. And in fact, I'm going to send you out, Patty, if you can make a note for me, please. I'm going to send out some material I have on facial expressions. There used to be an amazing TV show called Lie to Me, and I'm not a TV guy, but my son gave it to me on DVD. It was called Lie to Me, and it was the art of reading people's faces, how to tell if people are telling the truth, how to tell if they're telling a lie. And it goes into, the scenarios in the show, but then they'll show real footage of Nixon saying, "I am not a crook." And you'll see, Jimmy Swaggart when he was apologizing for what he had done. And it shows real life scenarios of real people doing the exact same things that they're talking about. They're called micro expressions. And if you want, you can do a search, Lie to Me test, and you can actually do an online test to see how good you are at reading people's facial expressions. So you watch a clip and it says to you, are they telling the truth or are they lying? And then they'll look at micro expressions. What did you see in that micro expression? And I'm going to encourage you to become as good as you can at facial expressions and reading people's faces. Then, of course, a huge part of communication is body language. Then there's written communication. Then there's touch or feeling. And then, of course, there's demonstration, which is show and tell. The challenge that you have on the phone is there's really only two: the verbal and the listening. So because we don't have the facial expressions, the body language, the written, the touch, the feel, the demonstration, it's a lot more challenging to be on the phone and communicating just with verbal and listening. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, there's a huge difference between hearing and listening. A lot of spouses will say, yes, that's certainly true. When you're talking to somebody, it's like kids. I've got 3 adult kids, and I really don't remember the last time I spoke with them that they weren't on their cell phones at the same time. Not the entire time, but I remember one time I'm talking to my son, and he was on his cell phone. And I said, "Son, you're not really listening." He said, "Oh, yeah, I heard you, Dad." I said, "Great. What did I say?" He said, "Well, you don't understand. I'm a good multitasker." I said, "Great. What did I say?" And multitasking is actually a total fallacy. It cannot happen. You cannot give 100% attention to 2 things. It's not possible at all. My daughter did a science fair project years ago, and it was about cell phone usage. And the law had changed that you couldn't be holding your cell phone, that you had to have speakerphone, some Bluetooth or whatever. And that was really the problem. I don't know about you, but I've experienced it. I'm driving someplace, my cell phone's on, the speakerphone's on, and I'm talking to this person. Recently, I was talking to Kevin from Gemcar. We're having a conversation. I'm getting all excited about our conversation and some of the projects we were working on. And I'm driving and I'm talking to him, and it really should have only been about a 4-minute drive. And the next thing you know, I look up, I'm on this stony trail, it's called in Calgary, and albeit it goes fast, it's like 110K an hour, but I realized that I was in the south side of the city, at least 20, 25 kilometers out of my way. And back to the science fair project, what they found was it doesn't matter if you're holding the phone or not, that's not been the issue. You cannot focus all your attention on your driving and talking to that person at the exact same time. So multitasking is impossible. Now, real multitasking is the ability to be doing something, stop doing it because you got to answer the phone and coming right back to that. And then you're doing something, maybe it's an estimate for a customer and somebody walks in. The ability to stop that, deal with the customer and come back. But sometimes we're trying to do 2 things at the same time and it truly doesn't work. So the comment is it's harder to get people's undivided attention because of all the stuff that's going on in our lives. What I find frustrating is when somebody's standing in front of you trying to text at the same time or talking on the phone. I remember one time I was at my bank and somebody was on the phone as they walked up. And they apologized to who? Not the teller, but the person on the phone. "Oh, sorry, I'm at the bank." I thought, why would you apologize to the person on the phone and not the person that you're standing in front of and rudely and not talking to them? So we hear, but we oftentimes don't listen. We hear, but sometimes we don't remember what was said. And as I mentioned, multitasking is a fallacy. Just briefly, there's 7 C's of effective communication. And it's important, especially on the phone, again, because we don't have the other forms of communication that we could use to understand people. 7 C's of effective communication. Our communication on the phone needs to be clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, and complete. And it's interesting to go through recorded phone calls. And I've got hundreds. I'm only going to send you 3. Again, good, bad, and ugly. You won't have to wonder which one's the good, bad, and the ugly. But you can go through the phone calls and see Were they clear? Were they concise? Were they concrete? And we do recommend that you have some of your own calls recorded so that you can go through your own calls and ask yourself, was it clear? Was I clear on the phone, or was it maybe obscure? Was I concise, or did I ramble on? Was I concrete? Was it correct information, or did I make up a price? Sometimes a person calls and we throw out a price and we don't even know exactly what kind of vehicle it is sometimes, or we've not diagnosed it, yet we're giving a price. Again, coherent and complete. And the last one there is courteous. And just so you know, the source that came from is called mindtools.com. And if you do want to get some more information on those C's, you can go to their website. So here, I believe, are the 8 steps for securing an appointment. As of yesterday, it was actually 7. And today, super early this morning, I was going through this and I thought of one more that I wanted to add. So the 8 steps of securing an appointment. First of all, I suggest that you always take notes. So when a person calls you, you take notes. So if they do call back, you've got that information at the ready. The proper introduction and greeting. That simply means, yes, you answer the phone correctly, but sometimes we answer the phone so often, so many times a day. I mean, really, how many times does your phone ring in a day? And sometimes we say it so fast that it wasn't clear. So if I call the shop and they answer the phone super quickly, I go, sorry, I didn't catch that. I'm really wanting them to slow down because this person's calling you maybe for the first time. And although you've said the name of the company thousands of times, they're hearing it for the first time. My favorite approach was a shop that I called years ago, although Economy Auto, bad company name. But I remember calling and recording the phone call. And here's how he answered the phone. He said, thank you for calling Economy Auto. This is Eric. I can help you. Instead of how may I help you, it's I can help you. And I've adapted that. That's been at least 15, 16 years maybe. And when I answer my phone, I say, thanks for calling Kelly the Coach. This is Kelly. I can help you. And I just think that's a little bit more of a succinct way to do it. Number 2 is control the customer by asking questions. You're going to see samples on the next page. I know for sure the biggest mistake that we make on our phones is allowing the customer to be in control of the conversation. There's nothing wrong with saying, can I ask you a question? Number 3 is ask for the caller's name and write it down. I know that sounds so basic, but when you listen to the calls that I sent you, and you listen, I've again made thousands of calls, recorded hundreds. Most times, I would safely say that 7 or 8 out of 10 calls, the person doesn't even ask for our name. Sometimes we think they're not really going to come in. Sometimes we think they're just a shopper. And it's our responsibility to convert them from a shopper to a customer. So when we write down their name, we suggest that you use it at least once or twice during the phone call. As for the caller's phone number, I do suggest that you ask for their name first. And of course, you want to write that down. Number 5 is set a specific appointment and use your schedule. A specific appointment is a specific day at a specific time with a specific person. Sometimes a person comes in and says, hey, I'm here for my appointment. And you think, oh, I don't see you on the schedule. Sometimes the owner didn't write down the name or the appointment. I don't see you on the schedule. Do you know who you spoke to? I don't know. I got some guy named Tony. I don't know. Our recommendation is that you say, Michelle, your appointment is with me, Kelly. I'm the advisor. And your appointment is on Tuesday. And we recommend that you don't have everybody show up at the same time. My experience being a customer is most shops ask you for 8 o'clock in the morning. Bring in at 8. And my experience is I call it 8 and wait. And I don't mean 8 and wait for my oil change. I'm talking about I get there at 8 o'clock, kind of the group appointment. And at 8 o'clock, there's 2 or 3 people that show up. So now I'm in a hurry because I got a couple of people at the counter. I'm certainly not going to take the time to get lots of extra information. Probably won't get them to fill in a drivability questionnaire if they have a drivability problem. Probably am not going to go out to the car and do the walk-around inspection. But when you separate your appointments, we recommend 8:10, 8:20, 8:30, 8:40. Sure, you want everybody in hopefully before 9 or 10, but we certainly don't want people showing up at the exact same time. And without exaggeration, I would safely say that at least 90% of the appointments I've made at shops is 8 o'clock. Number 6, reconfirm the appointment and include their name. and your name. So you say, okay, Patty, again, your appointment is going to be on Tuesday morning at 9:20, and you're going to be meeting with me. So use their name at least once or twice in the call. And 7, I think it's a good idea to ask them, would you like us to send you a text reminder the day of their appointment? If you'd like, we can do that. If you prefer, we can call you if you like, and make a note of how you want, or how that person wants to be reminded of the appointment. I'm going to recommend that you actually use the word confirm the appointment, because some people say, you don't need to remind me, I'm not forgetful, I don't have Alzheimer's. So you could simply say, would you like me to remind you, confirm the appointment. And lastly is thank them for calling. So thank you, Patty, for calling, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Just about done here. Telephone skills. The most common mistake made by advisors on the phone is simple, is allowing the customer to be in control of the conversation. If I call you and every question I have is about price, and you don't start to ask me questions, how is the conversation ever going to get off price onto what it should be, diagnostics or inspection? So I recommend, instead of allowing the customer to be in control, asking you questions, I'm going to encourage you to take control of them. And by the way, one thing that you'll notice, obviously, with most calls, maybe some of your own, is here's what happens a lot. The phone rings, we answer the phone, the customer asks a question, we answer the question, and then there's a pause. I call it the call hangs. I don't mean hangs up, but the call hangs. And then the customer asks the next question, and we answer the question, and then there's this pause. What are we doing? Waiting for the next question. And in reality, many times after the questions are over, the call is done, and we didn't take them through the 7-step process. So I'm going to encourage you to simply say, can I ask you a question? Or can I ask you some questions, please? Some of the questions you can use just to take and gain control of the conversation. We're not trying to diagnose the problem over the phone. We're not trying to find out what the problem is, so we try to tell them what we think it is. Just some questions to gain and maintain control. If you feel like you're not in control of the conversation, for me, I love court drama. I love, you see the lawyer stands up and what do they call it? They call it controlling the witness. What does that mean? They ask questions. The witness can't ask a question. They answer the questions. So the lawyer asks the questions to the witness, controlling the witness, and you think, oh, that person's definitely innocent. And up stands the district attorney, and they start asking questions, controlling the witness, asking different questions. And 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, maybe 20, you think, oh, maybe they are guilty. So whoever's asking the questions is the person who's in control of the conversation. And I don't mean we're controlling. Nobody likes to be around controlling people, but we certainly need to be in control of the conversation. So if you feel like you're not in control of this conversation, some of the questions could be, have you been into our shop before? I want to know, is this an existing customer or they've not been there before? Especially if you're new to the shop, you've only been there for 2 months or 6 months or whatever, and maybe this customer's been in many times, but you don't recognize the name because you're new there. We can ask questions like, have we serviced your vehicle before? What is the year, make, and model? I find it interesting that people will give a price over the phone, which we don't recommend. And there'll be another session on dealing with pricing on the phone. That's a completely separate silver bullet. But I've had people give prices without even asking what year, make, and model. How many miles or kilometers do you have on the vehicle? How long have you owned the vehicle? Not that you'll ask all of these, but you need to work it with how the conversation's going, reading the customer, personality types, etc. We've talked about that in other sessions. It's a good idea to ask if you're experiencing other problems, because sometimes a person comes in and says, oh, by the way, I know I'm here only for an oil change, but while I'm here, could you look at this? Could you check that out? I've got this noise, it's pulling to the right or whatever. Sometimes they say, while you're in there, could you? So it's a good idea to ask them on the phone, are you experiencing other problems? And they might say, oh, yes, it's doing this and this. Sometimes you can ask if the check engine light is on. And sometimes it makes sense if they think they know what the problem is. Has the problem been carefully and professionally diagnosed? A couple last things. The caller, in this case, it's a shopper, not a current customer. They want a price, now what to say. And again, we're going to get into this more detail in another session. Some of the things we suggest you do not say is, we don't give prices over the phone. Now, that may be true, but just because it's true doesn't mean we should say it that way. It actually sounds rude. I hear a lot of people say, sorry, but. Well, why are you sorry? Sounds like you should be doing something and you're sorry that you're not doing something. I've had people say, sorry, our policy is not to give prices over the phone. So you have this policy to not give prices and you're actually sorry about your own pricing. And this last one was actually a sarcastic one. A fellow in a workshop one time, he would say to the person when they're looking for a price, he'd say, excuse me, well, what color of shirt am I wearing today? You don't know because you'd have to see it, right? Well, that's extremely rude. Saying sorry again makes it sound like we should be doing something, but we're not. I think the only time we need to say sorry is if, in fact, we did something wrong. And if we say sorry, it sounds like we're trying to be inflexible. Value words, and again, when you hear the recorded sessions I'm sending you, you're going to notice a lot of people will use words like for diagnostics, look, check, pull the codes, those kinds of things. Those diminish value. And we're going to recommend that you use value words like inspect, diagnose, analyze, and never use the word look or pull the codes. I've had people say, well, we need to pull the codes, bring it in, we'll pull the codes. Well, how do you pull codes? What does that even mean to the consumer? It's important that we think like a customer. So your homework between now and the next silver bullet is I'm going to encourage you to listen to the recorded calls that I sent you. I will be sending you, and listen to the 3 calls and ask yourself, did they go through the 8-step process, back to the 7 C's, did they use those, and did they use value words? And you're going to find, again, I know this from experience, making all those calls, that a lot of people say, well, bring it in, we'll look at it, bring it in, we'll check it out. Those are not money words. I'm going to encourage you to use value words. Make sure that you go through the 8-step process and see how well the advisor did. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, are they using value words or diminishing value words? Lastly, is I do suggest that you record your own calls and repeat the same process. The question is, did you go through the 8-step process? And of course, there's voice tone and those kinds of things as well. But did you go through the 8-step process? How well did you do at the 7 C's? And did you use value words or diminishing value words? And the question is, how well are you doing at the phone? And one of the things we will be doing in the near future is calling each of our group members, recording those calls. I did have somebody set up to do that, and that didn't work out. So I've arranged for somebody else to do it. So thank you for your time and your attention. Until the next time, the next silver bullet, it's a happy implementation. And thank you.